the I'm eating keto or I eat keto, again, it's like, how are we defining this? And I'm not saying that eating like keto or you saying like I eat keto is a bad thing. I don't want this to sound like disparaging for those people that have really latched onto this, had success with it, enjoy that, and it works for them. It's not what I'm saying at all. I just have to say, like, when I hear people say that, a lot of it, there's always like this, okay, but before I go any further in this conversation, I have to get what your understanding of...
Let's evaluate.
Yeah. So for me, and it's like this, and we've talked about this before, like you go to a party or you go to a social gathering or whatever as the gym owner or as the nutrition coach or the personal trainer, these fucking conversations come up all the time. It's like, leave me alone, I'm not working today, but they want to have them with you for whatever reasons. It's their own personal reasons. And that is, it's like letting your dog off leash and into somebody else's space. Like, it's rude. Like, let's have the typical party conversation where you don't give a fuck what I'm talking about. I don't give a fuck what you're talking about.
You just smile
we
and
move on to the next thing, right? Like, where's the bar?
Good to see you, my man. Yeah. How's the wife?
In all seriousness, it just comes up, and then people want to ask more detailed questions. Just like, before I answer this question, like, I have about 75 questions for you about what your understanding of this is, what your history here is, and kind of where you're coming from. So there is sometimes a little bit of eye rolling or on the inside going, oh my God, here we go again. So that's kind of how I started this with like, I don't really know how to start this. I'm not salty about it. I may come off that way a little bit sometimes, but I think what's important is that people get a better understanding of what this is, because you may have a friend or a family member who's like, I eat keto, and maybe
is it really keto or is it just a very low carb diet?
And so that's something to understand. You might want to understand whether they do or not. And the other part of it is like there's a lot of people that have adopted this style of eating that have had tremendous success, but keto is not a way you eat. It's a state, a metabolic state that you reach at a certain point. You guys want to cover that at like the highest level?
Yeah. It entering into a state of ketosis essentially happens when your body runs out of glycogen. So your body, when you're consuming carbohydrates break down eventually to glucose. Glucose is either circulating in your bloodstream or it's stored in either your muscles or your liver as glycogen. Glycogen is, you can consider it stored carbohydrates. When you severely restrict carbohydrates, your body will then utilize what stored glycogen it has left until there is no more glycogen left. And then, not to get too far into the weeds and get people confused, a process called gluconeogenesis will begin, where your body can utilize protein or other stores that it really doesn't want to use. It's kind of like the emergency fuel to try to produce a little bit more glucose, but your body doesn't like to do that. So when you've exhausted all of your stores, your emergency fuel, your body needs to keep you alive somehow. Now we switch to a different type of fuel, which is ketones. So that's when you talk about the process of becoming fat adapted, which that also can be a little bit of a misnomer, sort of the transition into keto and what can lead to that keto flu and how that we can get deeper into that as well. But your body is transitioning from carbs to using fat.
There you go. And that was a great explanation, man. Sounds like you may have done that a time or two with a client or two.
Yeah. And then I was like, but see, this product here actually has about 4 grams of keto in it. So you can actually skip all those steps and just consume this. So here you go.
Here's your keto in a can.
Yeah, keto in a can.
Keto in a can. This is great. That was a great explanation. You touched on a couple of things there. Basically, it's when you reach a state where you're using fat for your major source of fuel, which does happen through the day anyways, right? But in the absence of carbohydrate. So you mentioned the term fat adapted. So or you could become fat adapted, but your body's using fat for fuel. It's essentially where you're at. And that process is not entirely friendly for the body for initially. Like if you've ever been there, maybe you've dieted down for as a fitness competitor or physique athlete or whatever, you may have reached this state in your attempts to lose fat. And, it doesn't feel very great. Now, usually you don't stay there for very long. So you don't really have to suffer for a long period of time. You're there for maybe a matter of days, so to speak, and then you ultimately you'll start to carb back up and hit your show if you're carb depleting and things like that. For people that have maybe done this or toyed around with that, they can relate. The point of this is your body's using fat. It doesn't really like to use that all the time. Like carbohydrates are a way more efficient source of fuel.
Fast fuel, yeah.
And fast fuel. It can really process it quickly. So it can empower you through the day. It prefers that, especially if you continually give it to it and expect it to. And it's also based on the activity that you're using, what it'll be better at using for fuel. But you mentioned a term there, gluconeogenesis. And that's what happens when protein is converted into glucose to be used as fuel.